Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Jeff Andrews with Business of Childcare. Excited to have you joining us today for a great session as we continue lifting up exciting things, as I say, that are happening in our world of childcare and communities and everything else. Excited to be joined by Robin Phillips, who will more formally introduce here in just a second. But before we get started, I would love to just introduce you for a moment to Business of Childcare. If you haven't heard about us, uh, we've been around almost 5 years, celebrating 5 years next month, actually. And topics like this are just part of our work. We really focus our work on a whole community approach. And as we get started here in just a second, we'll poll, get a feel of where everybody's from. But my guess is a good mix of folks that are across the spectrum of what makes up each of our small towns, our big towns, and every town in between a community. And community is about the things that make it the place to be and the place to thrive. And our work is really about helping communities come together at the right stage of readiness for childcare. And that really takes three different stages. Understanding impact, which more and more is probably the reason you might be here today, is you're seeing the impact in your communities. We also help communities build plans, actionable, executable plans in a short time frame so we can get that momentum going and continuing to build. And that's where we get to activating the plan. And that's really a lot about what today is activating opportunities. And before we get started on that, activating the opportunity, I'd like to just get a sense of where everybody's from. And I think the chat is open. But I'm going to throw a poll up here if I can find my poll here. I'd love to just get a sense of where everybody's at as far as your perspective in today's conversation. Are you an employer, a community leader? I know we get childcare operators and providers, maybe a government policy. Maybe you're not sure, and that's okay too. We're starting to see some good responses here. We've got a great crowd. I'm excited to see all of you here. Just a few more seconds here. As we start to think about why we come to these calls, we also think about the perspective in which we're starting to look at childcare as infrastructure. And that's a big shift from just being a family problem to really one that we see has an impact on our community. We'll wrap up that poll here. I'm going to give a share for everybody. A good mix of community leaders, providers, government leaders, employers, a really great audience for the conversation that we're having today. And as I mentioned, infrastructure is a big part of it. When we think about childcare, it is an economic system, and the conversation today about connecting more employers and benefits and opportunities really starts to illustrate that, right? It's about enabling labor participation, helping people realize wages, and ultimately leading to our better community vitality. And so, what a great topic to have, and a great individual, Robin Phillips. I've known for almost a handful of years now, it seems like, maybe longer at times. I'm going to give a chance for Robin to introduce herself. She's the CEO of Childcare Aware Missouri, and I may get the words mixed up, Robin. I know you'll fix me on that, but tell us, introduce yourself, Robin. Let the audience know a little bit about you and your work and the organization you're with.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for taking time out today to join this conversation. I love talking about this work. It has lit another fire in my 25-year career of childcare systems building and certainly surrounding myself with thought leaders like Jeff. Yeah, it's probably been about 5 years or so, Jeff, and I know we're very like-minded, so it's important to fill our tanks and be around people who are like-minded so we can stay fueled up and be the best versions of ourselves. And I know Jeff and I provide that kind of relay and reciprocal support for one another. Yes, I'm the CEO of Childcare Aware of Missouri. We're Missouri statewide childcare resource and referral network. We do a lot of things that build into the workforce, and some of our latest efforts actually kind of did a soft launch probably about 3 years ago and has evolved significantly through collaborative partnerships to where we are today. So we'll talk about some of that. Um, like I said, certainly very passionate about learning. I'm still learning. I might be having some success in what we're doing, but trust me, I have a lot to learn. And so I try to surround myself with other people I said myself. Sometimes I feel like there's more than one of me some days, but like just being around other people who know more than I do that I can learn from and learn the economic development speak. I've made a lot of intentional effort to do that over the last 3 to 4 years. So I'm sure some more of that will come out in our conversation today. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And we're so glad to have you, and it's going to be a great 50 minutes ahead, I guess. But Robin, tell us a little bit about kind of leading up to the moment. We're going to talk today about the big program, but maybe we'd start with where the problem, and you talk about maybe even yourself and your team learning and growing as it relates to some of that broader impact that childcare is more seen as in everyday life. Where were some of the conversations, or was some of the lead up to the moment where this became an idea in the boardroom that became something? What was that like for your team and your experience around the state?
Yeah, and I think to be transparent, I believe in transparency. I believe in sharing, what we've learned from because you can only get better when you've had failures or barriers you've had to overcome. And, our team here is about 20 people, and many of us have worked together for a long time. So we had, for many years been throwing lots of ideas on the boardroom wall and having conversations. And then, of course, many of our organizations, probably some of you represented today and our own, had become a little too dependent upon state contracts. And we aren't, our organization is an educational intermediary. We're not a charity. We steward a lot of public dollars, and so you get somewhat dependent on those, and that's not a good place to be. I'm going to tell you that right now. But what had happened to our organization that kind of forced the evolution of some of this change is we bid on a contract for resource and referral that we had held for 24 years. And you have to bid on it like every 4 years. And for the first time ever, we did not win that bid. We didn't, it's not because we did anything wrong. It was just competitive and we probably didn't have the lowest price because we know what the work costs to do and to do it well with high level customer service. And it was just a moment where we were kind of like, okay, but I'm not of the mindset that we're going to wave a white flag, and nor is my team because we all are rowing in the same direction. And we just went in the room, and I'm like, fill up the wall with ideas. Like we have these massive, we aren't smart technology in there yet, but we have these massive walls of glass boards, and it's like just fill them up. And, that could have gone one way or the other. That could have been empty room or it could have just been robust. And that room was robust with ideas. And from there, we birthed Childcare Keeps Missouri Working and then started identifying additional work that we could do that needed to be done. Because, like you said, Jeff, childcare is not a family's issue. I've said that for years. I've said that to meet, people in the media and interviewing. Like there are going to be people who still talk about it that way, and like that's like old school thinking. And so I'm all over here about being innovative and entrepreneurial and solving a systemic issue, and remaining in the same mindset doesn't create transformational change. So I'll stop there because I could
Oh
continue to
no,
go
it's good.
on with
Well,
that.
and maybe because we've got obviously a broad audience of community leaders, what were some of the maybe themes, if we might say it that way, that led to some of that work on the whiteboard, so to speak? Or what were some of
Yeah.
the things you heard in conversations that you or your team even heard that maybe would be recognizable to those in the audience today?
Well, definitely workforce recruitment and retention, both in the childcare sector, which is the workforce behind the workforce, and then just speaking with economic developers and other and getting to know business leaders and getting involved in chamber activities and just again trying to learn outside of my circle of people, right? And it was the retention, it was all post COVID. COVID revealed a lot, and I really don't want to go back into that because it's a little I don't even know if we're out of it, but it seems like so many challenges surfaced during COVID, and they haven't gone away. Getting people to show up for interviews, let alone to getting people to show back up for work or getting moms back into the workforce, and just the cost of childcare and the broken system and the fragmentation. I mean, we can throw all the words out there, and these were things we talked about, and we said we want to like stop talking about it, like we want to do something about it. So at that point, about 18 months after we lost that competitive contract, it came out for bid again, which remember, I said it usually goes out like every 4 years. So doesn't matter why it went back out. It went back out. We rebid. That included a new service that we had built out, and it's not uncommon for resource and referral agencies across the country to do what's called extended referral or a specific one where you're really honing in. But we launched it and branded it under Child Care Keeps Missouri Working as a concierge service. And we were selling it to employers and individuals who wanted a more customized navigation for time saving. We all, I would assume most of us know, either through your work or having your own children in childcare, that researching childcare is very overwhelming and you don't know what you don't know. It doesn't matter if you make $10,000 a year or $100,000 a year. So we were assisting in that. And so fast forward to when we rebid on the contract that had come back out for resource and referral. And let me mind you, a statewide call center for subsidy navigation for families, which was something we had never done. We made a decision in that same boardroom of, do we want to pursue this? Because we didn't want to be a call center. That's not who we are. And we wanted resource and referral back because it's part of our brand and who we are. And so when we bid on that, we built in that concierge referral service. So it's no longer paid for, or where, we no longer, it's subsidized that way. And then at the same time, I was just, Jeff, I've said this to you and maybe a few of you even on the call, because I know a handful of people on the call. Like, I just threw on my overalls, people, and I just started slinging seeds as fast as I possibly could everywhere I went. I probably get that gift. I know I get that gift from my dad. And I was just like, anybody who will listen, I'm just going to leave them. I'm going to leave them everywhere. And they started sprouting. A lot of relationship building, a lot of time, a lot of travel around the state of Missouri, but it propelled us forward to get us to the next level of collaboration with other partners and where we are today.
And that's what's so exciting. I just got back, did about a 4,000-mile road trip out through the southwest of the U.S. A lot of great country out there. The theme, though, and you and I talk about this, repeats itself. The help wanted signs are still dotting the rural landscape, even more so sometimes than our urban settings, right? And when we think about that, and we think about what you were just talking about, the lead up to this, the constant, I guess, sharing of our workforce is our limitation. And that's why I think the angle that you guys landed on, and I'm going to have you introduce the program here next, but that angle is what we hear in our conversations. It's what we see when we travel the roadways of America as help wanted signs still dominate the landscape. And
Mhm.
we understand that, at least no town that I've been in, are there a bunch of small children running around Main Street. We're thankful for that, but it means they're somewhere. And it either means often with a parent at home who would rather be taking one of those great opportunities at the local manufacturer or somewhere else. You guys saw that opportunity and the work that you've done historically and leading up to this. Tell us and introduce the program. Talk about what it became and what it's named today, and just talk about it. I think I've got a slide that kind of highlights the three elements I can bring up if you want. But
Oh yeah, okay. The
but let's
infrastructure
talk a little
slide.
bit about
Yeah.
what it became. What is the moment that you guys
Yeah.
are celebrating and activating?
Well, and let me back up just a little bit because part of post COVID and in that period of time where we were, I call it recalibrating after we had not won the bid, and in that 18-month transition, that all happened for a reason, y'all. And it was a blessing in disguise because it forced us to put into play what we had been talking about. And I'm like, I'm the person that's always like, walk the talk. But those of us who run, work in the nonprofit sector, we're often like maxed out. So it's hard to have the extra capacity to do those things. And that forced us to do that. And our board worked with us through that transition so that I was able to retain everyone. So that we could reinvent and recalibrate. And so some of the work that we've been doing, we've been researching tri-share models in Michigan and other, so we aren't the first to do it by all means. I don't ever want anyone to think it's that. We're just doing it a little different, but we were able to learn from others and figure out what would work best for our state and our demographics and what kind of funding that could come up from it. We had also researched, other ways to increase capacity in childcare because Missouri doesn't allow for standalone. We have standalone family childcare homes, but they are in residences of people. And that's not a reality for many people in buying a home or let alone renting, just with the cost of everything and the lack of housing. So it was like, how else can we get creative? So we had done all this research and had all these ideas. And then we work in partnership with our statewide advocacy organization here in Missouri, Kids Win Missouri. And, they do a lot of policy work and legislative work, in the topic of childcare and healthcare and all kinds of things to make things better for families and for children, but took an interest in the early childhood piece. And they were doing some things. And we were both kind of doing our own thing. We know how this works. This is reality. We have our own strategic priorities. We're all focused on what we're doing. And then that executive director and I, and he and I talk about this all the time. We're actually presenting on it next month in DC. But we went to lunch. It was just one of those things where it was like, hey, like, tell me about what you guys are doing. Let me tell you about what we're doing because it probably makes sense for us to figure that out before we keep making more progress and staying too siloed if we're trying to systematize things. And so really just boiled down, Jeff, to where I just flat out said to him, I said, listen, it sounds like you're going the direction we're going. You have different assets and strengths than we do. We have different assets and strengths than you do. What are we going to do here? Are we going to collaborate or are we going to compete? Because let's just lay it out. And if you don't know me, I'm very direct like that. It's just like, come on, we don't have time to hee haw around. Let's just get it done. And he just looked at me and he's like, well, I'd like to collaborate. And I'm like, boom, then let's go. And from that lunch forward for me was a touch point where we linked arms and I was going to honor that verbal commitment. And he was too. And fast forward now 2.5 years. And that collaboration is happening in real life. We all talk about it. We all want it, but sometimes it's hard to keep doing it because people, just human nature, kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. But it's Jeff, this value in leadership of having crucial conversations and just addressing it and being honest and real and figuring it out together because we're never going to create transformational change if we're all in our own silos. It just doesn't work in our own organizations. It doesn't work in systems change. And like if you're like me, some of you, I'm tired of talking about it. I've been talking about it 25 years. And like I want action. And so that's what we're doing. And so out of that, Kids Win Missouri and many of partners that they had been working with um, secured funding, developed this whole methodology of what the TriShare state funded program was going to look like in Missouri. And I kept advocating, saying, I want to be, not I, but you understand, Child Care Missouri wants to be the centralized statewide entity that operationalizes this. It just makes sense. And they said, okay. And so we moved forward from there. And so this is the website that Kids Win and its partners built out where for those who want to know more about child care works from a family perspective, an employer perspective, providers, some other things. There's information on here. It's not gonna give away the whole farm, but it's going to give you a lot of context about how we're pursuing it in Missouri. Now, what's important to understand is that Missouri and Kids Win was significant in winning $2.5 million in the state budget last year to pilot a TriShare model in across Missouri. And so when we initially launched this, that's what we thought we had. So Jeff, if you'll share the that highway infrastructure, this is where it's evolved in less than 9 months. And this is how I explain it when I'm meeting with people. Highway model. Okay. If you've never been to Missouri, there's a lot of highways here. There's a lot of rural highway, and you don't see a whole lot. And there's a lot of highway improvement going on in our state. So people understand highways to be infrastructure, getting people from point A to point B. Yeah, well, so is childcare. Childcare gets people from work to home and vice versa. And so I built this infographic um, as a highway model to demonstrate infrastructure. And so what I said before was we initially had this state pot of money of $2.5 million to pilot a tri-share. So you see the green right there in the middle, and the middle icon there is the state. But understand that a tri-share is three legs of a stool. You're always going to have an employer, you're always going to have an employee, and the third leg of the stool is the funder. Doesn't have to be state money though. It could be an economic development grant. It could be community block grant dollars if allowable. It could be a philanthropic organization. It could be a duo of philanthropic organizations that become one funder. So, like, don't limit your thinking in that a tri-share only has to be done with state money, be done with local money. So, in a sense, if you see down there in that green lane in the bottom right, um, sorry, the chat kind of went over that. You see, I just have a little footnote there. And our statewide, state funded tri-share model came out of House Bill 5. And so this makes more sense to people in Missouri if we're referencing something. But then we are literally launching as we speak, it just opened 2 weeks ago, a tri-share model for the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and its first responders. That happened to also have state money out of House Bill 2, but the city of Kansas City chose to match the state's investment with local dollars. So there's that tri-share. And then on that one lane was duo share, and on another lane was quadra-share, where we have two funders, an employer and an employee contribution. So it can get really diverse, right? The theme of this whole thing was diversify income. So how do we diversify income to stand up and stabilize and launch these proof of concept pilots in communities that make sense for, whatever makes sense for their community?
So, Robin, when you're sitting with an employer, and I know you said you've been on the highways of Missouri, I was on there a month or two ago myself. Great highways to be on. But what is it you're saying to an employer? You get a chance to sit down for that coffee, that lunch. You're giving them the punchline of why them, why this is good for them. What's that storyline play out like?
Well, quite honestly, I've been leading those conversations, and I'll tell you, like, I have to tweak my narrative every single time, and I have to tweak it for the audience that I'm speaking to. So, when I'm having a conversation with an economic developer or a chamber president or the president of a manufacturing company, that statement can be, that opening line can be a little bit differently. But I'm often leading with, it's very common that most of our employers are dealing with workforce recruitment and retention challenges. We know childcare is a barrier. We know housing and transportation are barriers. My expertise is childcare. I also weave in the fact that with our Missouri people, because they would understand this, and I know other states have this as well, but I intentionally applied to be part of the Missouri Chamber's leadership program so that it was a whirlwind tour of the state across 9 months, but I intentionally wanted to, one, expand my network and learn about the rest of what our state did, and two, be touring those manufacturing companies and hearing directly from presidents and HR leaders what their challenges were. And every single one of them said childcare, every one of them. So I lead with that too, because, being a graduate of Missouri leadership carries some weight with people, especially legislators in our state, and helping them understand that I've never worked in manufacturing, but the fact that I try to pull from one of those experiences and make it relatable to the conversation or to their company helps build rapport. And so I talk about that. And I also may lead with the federal tax credit known as 45F. And I know we can touch on that later, but Jeff, I find it interesting that, but not surprising. I presented at a state economic development council summit in February, and there were about 65 economic developers in the room, some who wear dual hats because they're smaller communities, so they're the chamber president too. And I just took a poll. I said, who in the room here has heard of 45F? And about 12 hands went up in the room. And I also showed a map of all the counties in Missouri of where this cost share model conversations are happening or they're launching or they're different phases. And the counties that didn't have any conversations were white on that map. There was white and orange. I was using somebody else's map from Kids Win Missouri. And economic developers were emailing me on LinkedIn after that session going, my county is not orange and it needs to be orange. What do I need to do to change this up? And so from there, it sparked additional conversation. And it's just using your knowledge and your influence to create change and being diligent about having relational conversations and not transactional.
Well, it seems too that you're really helping maybe break down that global feel of sometimes the big headlines around childcare, right? We just saw Ready Nations report $172 billion impact nationwide due to childcare shortages. And as I tell audiences, I've never seen $1 billion.
Mm.
Most people have never seen $1 million, myself included. When we start to break it down to, the several examples you've already shared, localizing that conversation seems to be a theme that you carry forward as well, that this is a thing we can do here without necessarily waiting, wondering, and hoping for larger maybe initiatives and opportunities to play out. Does that seem to be a big win in your work as well?
I would describe a win as intrigued. People are intrigued and they want to know more, and I'm good with that because I can take that and run with it. But to your point, and some of the historical things we were doing when I was out there slinging seeds and doing presentations everywhere, the U.S. Chamber Foundation had done a report on Missouri's the impact to Missouri's economy due to lack of childcare. It's 2021 data, but I still cite it. And it was the $1.35 billion loss. We have state legislators who cite that because Missouri is still trying to pass its own state version of childcare tax credits. They literally just passed the House for the third year in a row, and they're currently in the Senate once again. So we'll see what happens there. But Jeff, what I learned from you in our conversations was understanding that when people can't work, and oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes it's due to lack of childcare or the ability to afford the quality childcare. And I'm always going to advocate for safe places for children and quality. That's just who I am by nature and what God called me to do. But you helped me understand and start framing language around lost wages. And when people aren't working, and you look at a median salary in a community, and those dollars aren't able to be reinvested in tax revenue or eating at the restaurant or shopping at the grocery store or whatever it is, that local economy starts feeling that impact. And then it just exasperates as more and more people are unable to return to the workforce. And again, we know for various reasons, but oftentimes when you see the surveys, childcare is cited as the problem.
Yeah, and when we boil that down, I like simple foundational things to walk away with. I always talk to audience about 10 slots represents $500,000 in economic activity in your community.
Mhm.
And in the towns that I visit and you visit, $500,000 missing or $500,000 added is noticeable, right? And so sometimes we hear the headlines, 1,000 slots short, five. There's a ton of short slots, but in my town of 500 or my town of 1,000, that 10 is even more magnified as far as loss of opportunity. But also at some point we seek opportunity elsewhere. And we know that we see just even some of the demographic, very localized patterns. We see some of those movements due to childcare desert. 65% of rural America lacks
Mhm.
sufficient childcare.
Mhm.
And so when we think about, community vitality, that term we throw around, the Main Street, it really is about a localized solution. We've got a great audience today. Great to see everybody sharing where they're from all over the country. Some
Mhm.
familiar names, some new names for me, but it's a good chance for us to take a moment and work another poll into our mix here. And this one is really about getting a feel of in your community where you live, how are or what role, if any, are employers playing in addressing childcare? Are they actively investing or participating? Maybe they don't see it as their role or somewhere in between. Love to get a feel from the audience. Not sure is just a good answer as any, right? Sometimes we're just getting a feel of the landscape here. I think part of this poll, Robin, as people take a chance, also highlights, as you mentioned, with the 45F and maybe the lack of even just basic understanding. I was in New Orleans speaking to a national audience in February. No one raised their hand.
Right.
And so we think about that idea is the gap really around awareness as much as it is desire to take action. We've got a good group of folks here participating in the poll. Let's take a quick look here, kind of in the midstream, right?
Hmm.
Not surprising. I think it's probably representative of what you and I and our team see out in communities, somewhere in that in between. What do you think is the piece that helps, at least as a headline, get employers to the table? I was just talking to an audience in Wisconsin last week, and one of the gaps is how do we get the employers in our community to see a place for themselves in this other than just philanthropic or for the goodwill of the community? Do you see examples where that engagement is coming through better than others?
Yeah, and I think what we like to call out as being unique to the Missouri Child Care Works model is when Kids Win Missouri was able to secure funding to have what we call local intermediaries. So there's about 16 of them right now in different counties, both urban and rural and kind of in between across Missouri. And before Child Care Works like went live and launched in November of 25, there was 2 years of seed throwing they were doing and conversations they were having and engagement, right? It was building the local army to be inclusive of the chamber, the workforce development person, the economic development person, maybe a legislator, maybe a local government official. Like they were strategically building a team of people where they could leverage their spheres of influence and networks to continue to move the army towards bringing people to the table. And I'll tell you, and some of you may have experienced this or are currently experiencing it. When I was talking about this 3.5 years ago in front of a whole bunch of statewide economic developers, and I've met, and some of my friends I think are on this call, and I call them friends because like they've helped me a lot. And I know I've helped them. It's been reciprocal. But like when I was in that room that day, the question that everybody said is, who's doing this? Who's doing this in Missouri? And then I said, I can't tell you that. I can only tell you what other states are doing, and Michigan's doing tri-share, and we have this state doing this, and we have some duo share going on over here, but like Missouri isn't doing it because guess what? We got to have the funding, and somebody has to go first. That's what you have when you want to pilot something. Somebody has to go first, trust the process, know that you're going to steward the dollars to get the metrics and the outcomes to show there's a need. And that's what we're doing right now. And so I think that the fact that we could spotlight that this was our governor's investment and his platform, even in a very Republican state, has been very forward about supporting early childhood education and his own background growing up in a single parent household and why it's important. And the fact that 45F and the fact that we were just getting ready to take this thing really big and really built it up, saying this is a limited opportunity. And it just kind of those local partners having those boots on the ground started bringing people forward. And then partnering with us and our networks and our abilities, everything we started like all cooking together in the same kitchen is the best way to describe it. And there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, don't get me wrong. And sometimes that's hard. And everybody has a part of the recipe to make it be successful. So when I talk about collaboration, it truly is that, and the handing off of batons and everybody going, okay, I've given you the baton. Or we say, hey, we weren't supposed to get the baton this early, like let's make sure we're all like doing this the the way that seems most effective so everybody holds their value in the conversations. And again, those are the kind of crucial conversations and check-in calls we have as a group across the state on the regular. And I think that's what's made this model unique and be more successful in diversifying some of the participation. And we're still early in, we're 4 months in, so it's not like we have 100 employers in, but we have a lot in the pipeline because our larger companies have a lot more bureaucracy and HR stuff to navigate than a small, sole proprietorship, uh, pharmacy or like an individual pharmacy or somebody's insurance company.
And I know we've got a few questions kind of getting into the mechanics, and I want to jump in there, but just for the benefit of maybe those in the room who also wouldn't have raised their hand in Robin's session on 45F, I want to just ground everybody on at a high level, and thanks to our good friends TOOTRiS for putting together this slide. I know you're going to talk about them here in a minute as well. But 45F, as it's commonly referred to, is not actually a navigational term. It's a hidden or deep hidden uh, part of the IRS tax code. And at the end of the day, it enables a benefit for employer contributions towards childcare at a very high level, where it got really exciting, in part by work Matthew Henry and others did out in DC last year, was improve the credit and value. So up to $600,000 now for small businesses versus the 150,000 max before. But more importantly, and you mentioned intermediaries, it's opportunity to more broadly invest those dollars without having to run childcare, without having to pretend you're ever going to have to be standing in a toddler room, without having it to be on your manufacturing site. Those were, I think, the biggest wins, is it really expanded the opportunity and use cases that could be applied for it, right, for that benefit and that opportunity. And while certainly that isn't always the reason we make contributions to things that work, and I think you're going to talk about the flip side, it's the investment in making it work better. It certainly is something for everybody on the call and those viewing in a later time to be aware of, because it's another
Mm.
opportunity that in some cases is the tipping point to activate some dollars within the community, within the employers to help participate, building something, supporting something, or somewhere in between. So I thought it'd be good for us to ground ourselves in that. But maybe we take a step back now, and there's a question related to this. But as we think about the system design, that maybe the first responders is a good example. I have their landing page we can certainly look at as well. But kind of just talk through at a high level, and again, just keeping this at a normal person speak as we think about for an employer that you're talking to. What is the use case? Talk us through maybe the Kansas City, Missouri first responders. What was the problem they ultimately were looking to address, and what is your solution as a component piece? It's certainly the funding elements, but as you mentioned, the concierge and some of the other elements of even just engagement to find a better way forward. Just talk through that, how that plays out as an example, maybe.
Yeah, and I don't have all the historical context about how that one came about because the state senator was behind that, and then the mayor pro tem of that city worked in partnership, I assume. Again, I don't have all of that to secure state funding, knowing that the city would match those dollars. So it was $3 million in state, and then the city said they would match it with 3 million. And in fact, there was a finance committee meeting happening right when this webinar started. So I couldn't, the first, couldn't be in two places at the same time. So I had some other of my teammates there to answer their questions. But again, it was first responders one. I think if you don't know, they work odd hours and non-traditional shifts. They don't have 9 to 5 jobs. And we know that oftentimes if there's a two-parent family, they may be working opposite shifts. And, I'm newly remarried, and when you don't see your spouse, like that's hard. And then especially if you're raising little children, which I'm way beyond that, but like it's hard. It's just hard and it's a demanding job. And then Kansas City is also preparing for the, international FIFA. I don't say it right. Sorry. I played soccer. I didn't do well. I played 1 year. So, but like this massive international tournament where just hundreds of thousands of people are going to implode into this city. And then, as part of Leadership Missouri, I might say, in that tour of the city of Kansas City, there, I think he was the assistant police chief at the time, was talking about retention of their police officers and the trying to raise wages. And, those conversations may be happening in your communities as well. Were happening in St. Louis too. And so, fast forward to what's one way to remove a barrier and help maybe address some affordability things? And the childcare topic came up, and that's they were actually going to go another route for whatever reason, and the state had already launched this statewide platform on TOOTRiS. And so we had conversations with Kansas City. They made some shifts, and we wanted things to be smooth for users in Kansas City and all the childcare providers. So the state over it's complicated, but yeah, the state, it's state dollars. And so like, let's use them all the same and be accountable through the same system and not create confusion. And so that Kansas City model launched through TOOTRiS as well. Like I said, it just went, we've been working on it a lot, but their application just went live a couple weeks ago. And it originally, as I've had conversations now, because I speak weekly to the mayor pro tem, and she said it really came from the 911 dispatchers that were single moms, many of them, and struggling to show up to the job, or they had a child or two and maybe didn't have a support system, and they didn't, a lot of them use family members, and that is absolutely great. But not everybody has that option or lives where their family lives, and they don't have that support system. So it's being offered to their first responders that are specifically police, aviation police because of the airport, fire, and then their 911 dispatchers are considered under the police department. And the amount of money there, some additional conversations happened today that will determine if we can serve more children, but we'll, depending on the funding, we'll be able to serve between 250 and 500 children 0 to 5 in full-time care.
And what does that mean for that employee, the aviation pilot, the different roles, the police officer, firefighter? What is that experience like for them? What does it mean to be a part of this partnership? Obviously, the funding support is a part of it. Is there anything else that do they have a portal they go to? Do they have the opportunity to better find care? What does that look like for a first
Yeah,
responder?
I mean, I think for in cases as we're reviewing these applications that have come in the last 2 weeks, we're currently processing about 100 right now at once, which y'all is a lot for one employer. So we have some other bandwidth helping us with that. It's not all of them are using, for our criteria, and because the Kansas City model was built off the child care works statewide model, there are requirements that the dollars flowing into the child care program had to either be licensed through the state of Missouri, or if not licensed, because we have faith-based facilities that are licensed exempt and we have unlicensed legal family child care homes, those entities, those kinds of programs could register or have to register for Missouri state subsidy, because there's some additional safety things they have to do. There's in Missouri, you have to take some, and the federal requirements too. You have to have background checks, and you have to take some additional safe sleep and some level of quality check. It didn't mean you had to serve children on subsidy. It just meant you were able to and had to have these additional requirements in place. And so some of that is now matchmaking the first responder with the appropriate childcare program that meets the requirement that that program is enrollment ready in TOOTRiS to receive those payments. And that if they're using grandma, how does grandma get registered to take subsidy? Because you can do that in Missouri too. And so there's a lot of that kind of behind the scenes stuff that's happening so that um, they could most possibly use their current childcare provider. And if they can't, then they can navigate that search through the TOOTRiS platform and our referral services that we've provided for so many years.
I was gonna say that's got a big part of it. I'm guessing as you talk to employers, is that connection, the concierge term that you've used.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big driver, right? I imagine that's quite attractive for employers as another way to connect employees to all the things that employees need, right? Childcare being one of them, but if I talk to the HR people, there's a long list of things that we're trying to connect people. Here's the TOOTRiS site. I'll put the link in the conversation as well, but it really lifts up visibility. It really provides a connection of providers and parents seeking and employers wanting to support. TOOTRiS does a great job. I know you've been a great opportunity to grow in Missouri through the work you've been doing together.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm guessing is a big part of the sale for employers, as well as we've got the tools organized in a system that maybe
Right.
takes a little bit of this burden and this crisis and this constant thing to a little bit less of a noise level than it maybe is in then lessening impact on our business operations on
Mhm.
so forth and so on.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue of being able to bring that platform forward, which, by the way, is an intermediary that qualifies in 45F, and the required paperwork to be in TOOTRiS as an employer, as a funder, as a provider, all align with what needs to be documented for 45F. So just throwing that in there too. But it's about like now I've lost my train of thought. That happens to people at my age. Sorry, the train will come back around in a minute. But I think it's just here we go. Here comes the train. It's being able to tell employers, like I just met with a company last week, and their HR people were in there and they were gung ho. Like I didn't even have to pitch it for 60 seconds. Their economic developer had already laid the groundwork, and they're like, all right, like what do we need to do? And like one thing though was, well, have you done a survey of your employees to even know what you need to do? So like just helping them navigate some of that, but then being able to say, once we figure out how many employees you want to support, guess what? We're not adding extra admin burden onto your employees here. Like we are moving all that. Yeah, we got to have a point person, and we need to know who's going to feed some of the HR information into the tutor so we can cross check, right, and be accountable for the money because that's important. But it's not like, oh, sorry, we need an HR person. You're going to have to hire somebody full time to
Right.
do that. That's not it. That's what a coordinating entity like ourselves is doing as a liaison between them and the platform.
Absolutely. And my apologies, I didn't realize the last poll had continued sharing. I did unshare, but we got a new poll, and it's right online and in time with what we're talking about. As you look at, again, your own setting, your own community, what of our opportunities here do you think are going to most motivate employers to become part of the solutions? And it's good to see we're getting some responses here. It seems to me, Robin, that more and more employers are at least making the connection of childcare being a limiting factor. I
Mm,
was just on a call a couple weeks ago. A factory owner down in North Carolina could actually illustrate that the second shift lack of employees, half of which could probably be filled with childcare, costing his company 15 million on the bottom line.
mm,
Like these are not small dollars that we're missing out on due to this, and like we've talked about, is infrastructure. Part of the solutions create the infrastructure for the whole system to work. So I'm going to end the poll here. I'm going to share it for just a moment here, and then we'll stop sharing it so it doesn't stay on your screen the rest of our time here. But employee retention, I think, is a big driver, right? Those are the employers that are looking at it just like we look at all the other benefits that we might offer, tangible, intangible, as the reason why. I know I saw Risa on here from Illinois. There was a local corporate participation in their work several years ago and continues to date because they needed workforce, second shift,
mhm,
and other. So we see a good list there. As we start to think about how this plays out, we've heard about the program, we've heard about the fact that it does require some dollars, but opportunities to make that a duo try or I think quadra share. It's going to be a new
mhm,
term I'm going to use the rest of my day here. What are the early results? And obviously, it's only 4 months, so probably
mhm.
the the big study and all of that. But what are you hearing
Yeah,
from some of
well,
your employer
so
partners or others?
yes, so some of the so in the state funded statewide model, it's based off household income. There's eligibility criteria, and it's basically for those who make too much for subsidies. So there are some narratives out there that TRISHARE only supports wealthy people. That's untrue. That is very untrue. Our model is built off serving between 150% federal poverty level all the way up to 555%. And some of that I think is on the website you shared earlier. And the lower you are on, so if you're at the 150% level, let me give you an example. Child care programs are businesses too. And so some of them are participating as employers. And so we have an early one. We had a pioneer who tested this whole thing before we rolled it out live to make sure we didn't have any kinks in the system. And the childcare costs in this program, and this, if it doesn't matter if you're a childcare program or not, some of your employees, if you're an employer, are paying $18,000 to $25,000 a year for infant toddler care in centers, a little less than homes. And depending on, if you're in New York or California, of course, it's going to be a little different. But in St. Louis, you're looking at easily $24,000, $26,000 a year for one baby in a high quality. And so this employer was already subsidizing 50% of that care for her teacher. And that teacher is making like right around $40,000 a year, which is pretty good for a childcare educator, but still pitiful. So don't take that. That's nobody's like, you know, you're still struggling making that. But now, because the way the model is, that employer now only has to contribute 30% because now this individual, based on her household income and size, she qualifies for 40% of state dollars. So now 70% of her childcare is paid for, and she's only having to pay 30%. So she's getting back, and this is rough math, y'all, but like that puts like a $15,000 raise back into her, annual household. And we hope like that's going to create some economic mobility, or just like I don't have to make the choice of paying for childcare or keeping my lights or heat on for some families. Like that's a big deal. And then we have a small mom and pop pharmacy down in Southeast Missouri, and he's choosing to do the same thing. And the fact that his employees may only be paying 30 to 40%, when they can get up to, somebody can get up to like 70, 75% of their childcare paid for, again, depending on their household income, like that's huge. I paid for childcare and it was on a sliding scale, and this was years ago in a military child, but a lot of people, they can't, businesses of childcare can't cash flow that kind of thing because they're already operating in the red. I think it's too early to see retention data, but some like five people I think spoke to the competitiveness, and there's a large county next door to St. Louis County. We hadn't had any employers come forward, and so I was working a lead there. And this small mom and pop family owned business came forward, and they're going to be supporting 10 employees. Guess who's running with a press release? We are, and calling out that employer as the first one in that county. And if that doesn't trigger some competitiveness of, well, hey, like we need to be doing that, like I'm going to be surprised if I don't get any emails after that goes out. And it's just about influencing and tipping that first domino so the rest slowly begin to fall. It's not going to be true in every county. We still have some very conservative counties that don't think that this is something they should be dealing with, and that's okay. We have plenty of other counties who want to address it, and so we're going to put our energies there.
Well,
Yeah,
when we
this
think
is
about
the
outcomes, I
mhm.
think just even having visibility in organization as a foundational element is a big win. I'm just scrolling through here for folks to get a sense of it's about having a program. It's about having a program you can illustrate and talk about, and making it accessible for folks to be able to engage in. I think they did a nice job on this. Talk for just a minute. I know we've got just a few minutes left here in our conversation. How does this work out? How does this program and all of this effort work out for the actual operator, the child care provider themselves?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought that up. So in Missouri, and I don't know what's true for other states represented on this call, but child care programs are often paid in arrears. And often, like, nobody can run a business like that. Like, I'm not going to hire a contractor to do work on my house and pay him 60 days after the fact. He's going to require some payment throughout. And so the nice thing about using a platform such as TOOTRiS is everything has to be put in all the payments for that one seat, if you will, in a duo share or tri share or quadra share have to be put in the checking account in advance. So the provider is paid in advance of the care, not in arrears of the care. And like the we don't have time, but there are lots of platforms out there that support childcare programs. We've chosen to invest in TOOTRiS for multiple reasons, and the back office supports and the fact that they don't charge childcare programs to utilize their back office supports and some other incentives they're offering right now is a bit of competitiveness as well. I think the fact too, just going, and because the clock's ticking down, I saw some comments about, not having a framework or not knowing the model. Like if you want to utilize the Missouri Child Care Works model in your state or in your community, like it's already built inside of TOOTRiS. It can be replicated in other states. That's what we did for the first responder model, was we replicated the state model. We made a couple customization tweaks in the system, but we already had all the eligibility criteria defined for what made sense. And it may mirror some of the, excuse me, demographics in other states on this call.
Right.
But yeah,
Well,
the payment up front is a game changer.
again, it's a whole community approach. It includes everybody, and often in the rush for new things and exciting things, we sometimes overlook those who have been doing the work. And I think this model honors that as much as it helps drive new activity and new opportunities. I have one last poll here. We'll just throw this up here before we lose everybody. We got 5 minutes. Here in Central Time, you're maybe waiting for lunch and hopefully stuck around. Our crowd has done well sticking around here. Last poll here is as we think about action, and I know Robin and team continue to work in Missouri. Certainly, maybe have a conversation for a moment if you were on board with us today. But as we think about the next steps, what do you think somebody in the audience today does locally to start the conversation? That's where I think we started this conversation today. It was a number of conversations. It was a number of things that led to this point. What's maybe a first step or tool as we finish up this poll here that people might think about as far as next or first steps to getting some conversation and dialogue going around something like what you guys have pulled off there?
As people are answering that, I just want to like help people, maybe some on this call, get out of their own way. I have a degree in child and family development. I do not know economic development, although I have intentionally learned more about it. I am not a tax expert. I'm a resource and a connector. And so making sure that you are surrounding yourselves with other people you can learn from, like I said at the beginning of the call, is critical to either get forward momentum or get you unstuck or to help you recalibrate. You don't have to be an expert of all things. You just own the fact you're not, but that you know people you can connect people to, or at least be a resource to the information.
Absolutely. Just a quick share of the poll results here. Again, everybody is on a spectrum, different places, different things. No matter how far you are into it or how far you are at the start line, certainly the team here at Business of Child Care, I know the folks at TOOTRiS, certainly Robin and team continue to do this work and continue to be partners with communities and individuals such as yourselves who have come forward today just to take an hour out of your time to hear about a really cool model. And I got to tip the hat, as they say, Robin, to you and team. Really exciting. It's really exciting to see the buzz happening. Last words for everybody to take away today as they ponder their next move for childcare broadly.
Yeah, takes 99 no's to get a yes. I mean, that's true. And you just have to stay persistent. You have to keep learning. You have to be willing to fumble a little bit and own it. I fumbled the other day in a Kansas City thing and I just owned it. I said I was going too fast. Thanks for catching my mistake. I'm being transparent and being authentic in your efforts. You're not going to win them all. But if you can get one or two, which might take you 20 or 30, and utilize those stories and build off that and build those relationships and build that trust. They may not bite right away to do duo share, but they may be willing to keep receiving your information. So persistence and a little bit of grit. It's tough because you got to be able to take no for an answer and be okay with it and move on. But that's my philosophy. You always ask because all you can get is a no. Can't get a
99
yes.
no's to a yes. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the other piece that's worth highlighting is there's a place for everybody. I
Mm-hmm.
know Sheila, I don't know that we fully answered her question. I was asking a question about funding pathways. What's a employer contribution? I know our
Mm-hmm.
work and in your work, I think the message is just start with a willingness work on finding something that matches for you to buy, so to speak, for you to invest in. It doesn't mean writing a
Mhm.
$100,000 check to build a new building. It could be a monthly commitment to the local kids association that helps fund training for the local providers. There's a place, I guess, is the point for employers of all sizes to be a part of solutions at that local level, which is often a better match anyway. And that's my hope. Thanks again, Robin, for joining and spending the
Thank
time
you.
today, continuing what is always a good conversation we have, whether
Yep.
online or not. For everybody who joined us today, again, encourage you to learn more by visiting Robin and the team site there, uh, Missouri Child Care Works. And I'm going to pull up the link here again, childcareworksmo.org. For those of you who missed the link earlier, it was in there. Businessatchildcare.com. If you need help
Hmm.
broadly as a community getting yourself organized or with a plan or ready to activate, our team is
Yes.
excited to connect and have some introductory conversations. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Take a step tomorrow for childcare, whatever it might be, big or small. It'll make a difference. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.